Hello, friends, and welcome to the No Bad Shifts podcast, a show for nursing students, new nurses, and all those in healthcare devoted to helping others and making the world for patients a better place. I'm Nurse Studa, your host, here to offer nursing tips, stories, motivation, and conversations with some of my favorite healthcare professionals so we can better learn to collaborate to make the hospital a more positive and supportive environment. Remember, with the right mindset, you really can learn from every day, and there really are no bad shifts. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of No Bad Shifts. I'm Nurse Studa, and today I wanted to dive in and talk a little bit about what to do on your clinical days when you are paired with a nurse that you feel like is super not engaged and you can tell really doesn't want a nursing student with them. So I know how frustrating this can be. I have been on the other side of it. I have seen it, and students have told me how disappointing and frustrating it is when you want to learn, you want to be alongside of them, and you want to ask questions, and you just feel totally shut down. And I know your time as a nursing student and in clinicals is so limited, and we already get such a short amount of time to work with patients and to be alongside real nurses that it can be really frustrating when this happens. Especially if you didn't already work in the hospital as an aide or transporter or phlebotomist or in dietary. If you just only get your time in nursing school to actually step foot in the hospital, you want to make the most of every situation. So while today's episode is primarily focused for nursing students, this can also go out to all the nurses out there that work in a place that gets nursing students, because as much as we want them to be involved and to advocate for themselves, it's just as important for us to create this safe space to communicate to help make them feel like they're involved. So today I wanted to give you some practical tips on just facilitating conversation and ways to be more involved. So hopefully you can kickstart a more friendly situation and feel empowered to advocate for yourself so you feel in control of your own learning and your own clinical experience, especially if you catch the vibe that it's going to be a tough couple hours with the nurse that you're assigned with. So I know that clinicals can be very, very stressful. You're already walking into an environment that you feel like you don't have a whole lot of say. You haven't learned everything in nursing school yet. You have restrictions on what you can and can't do. And sometimes it just feels like we're more of a burden than we are helping. But I'm here to remind you that the energy and the personality that you bring and your positivity, it really all makes a difference. And you bring so much value just by being there and being on the floors and being involved. So I know clinicals can be so stressful because, for one, you already have your clinical instructor who's asking you to do all kinds of care plans and write out all your medications. Maybe you actually have to give medications. Maybe you have to show them a full assessment on a patient, which is really scary. And to be honest, if I had to go back and check every cranial nerve in front of a clinical instructor, I would probably be just as nervous. So it's okay that all this is overwhelming. That's part of nursing school. But I know typically students get paired with a nurse or whichever patient that they're caring for that day. And I know there's plenty of nurses out there that are not super warm and inviting when it comes to this. Of course, me personally, I love having students, and I get so excited when someone just wants to be really involved and they want to go see all my patients with me. And while I know that may not be everybody's experience every week, I just want to give you some practical tips that you can start to incorporate so that even if this happens, you can still have a great shift and you can still learn a ton on your day on the floor. So the first piece of advice I'm going to offer you is to just be very clear with your nurse. Now, this kind of covers a couple things. So for one, be very clear how far along in nursing school you are. It is really tough as a nurse to try to delegate things or to try to teach things when we don't know how long you've been in nursing school so far. It may just be your first day on the floor compared to someone who's about to graduate and take the NCLEX. So if you can let them know right away, if you've never worked with them before, or even if you have worked with them before, just as a reminder, just being like, hey, so just want to remind you, we are in our last semester or our last quarter or whatever it is, and we're getting ready to graduate. So if I can follow you around with all of your patients, or if you get any skills, I would be really happy to help you with them or do them for you. But just kind of planting that seed of how far along you are, versus if you are in your first semester and this is like one of your very first clinicals, just telling them like, hey, by the way, this is our first clinical. I didn't work in healthcare before, so if I can just follow you around and just watch a lot of things and I can help with basic stuff, like please let me know. Even if it does feel like a little vulnerable, I think it helps break the ice of communication and starts to establish ways that they can incorporate you into the day. And that leads right into the next thing. Be very clear about the things that you can and cannot do. As a nursing student, every school, every program, every nursing instructor has different expectations and requirements and like the absolute like hands off, cannot perform tasks. And some instructors just want you to just be super involved and be along for the ride in whatever way you can. So if you can be very clear, like, so I'm not giving meds today, but if I can watch you pull your meds and give them to your patients, I would really appreciate that. I am allowed to do XYZ. And if you can just name a bunch of things that you can do or would be willing to help with, it would really help. So like, hey, I will happily get all your vitals and help wash your patients. I can take them for walks. I can take out IVs. I can do EKGs, bladder scans, straight cath. I can check blood sugars. I can feed patients. Just to start to plant ideas in their head. So then that way, if something comes up or they hear of another patient needing something, they will probably be more likely to grab you and involve you than if you just walk in and just introduce yourself and just say your name. This is going to make a huge difference in your learning because just sitting at the nurse's station and looking through charts or reading patients' notes is really not going to be that helpful when you start on the floor someday as a real nurse. It's great to look up notes and orders and lab values and test results. But the beauty of clinical is that you get to experience real people and real patients and real situations. And the only way that you're going to feel more comfortable as a nurse is just by interacting with real people and seeing how to communicate and how to handle different situations or difficult patients or family members or doctors. And all of that just comes with being present and being in the moment and listening to how other nurses handle these situations. Trust me, you would much rather be uncomfortable in a situation as a nursing student where you really don't have any true, real responsibility on your shoulders, except of course if you're giving meds or doing like a specific skill. But for the most part, you're there to observe and just be there as extra hands to help whenever you can. But just taking in like the overall experience will benefit you so much later. Also, realistically, you are probably hardly going to even have time to be sitting down when you are a real nurse. So what better way to acclimate to the busyness and running around than to just jump in with a nurse while you're a student so you can start to take in the feelings of everything that needs to get done and how much communication goes on in a day and all the charting that gets done. Just like being present through all that is really going to help you later when it really is your responsibility. So just try to break those walls of communication and just be open and up for helping in whatever ways you can. My next piece of advice is really just to sound interested in nursing in general. If you are listening in report and you hear that something unique is going on with one of the patients, ask if you can go watch. Like say you hear that a patient is going to the cath lab or is going to IR to get a drain placed or someone's going down to do a stress test. First, ask your nurse if that's something that maybe students are allowed to go down and watch. And then if they say yes, ask your clinical instructor, and chances are, if it's something that we can help facilitate and coordinate, we would be happy to help to call the lab or call the OR and say like, hey, I have a student with me. Is it okay if they come down? And more times than not, if you're at a teaching hospital, like this is what it's all about. We want students to be involved. We want them to experience all these things. And worst case scenario is that they say no. I had a student go down to the cath lab with one of our patients. And I remember when he came back, he was just so lit up and was so excited and was like, wow, that was so cool. I saw the dye go in. I saw everything light up on the screen. The doctor spent extra time teaching me and specifically asked if I saw these things and was pointing out specific arteries. And it was just so cool because once you start as a nurse, you will probably hardly ever have time to even step off the floor, let alone go watch a procedure be done. So if there's time in your clinicals to do these things, ask about it. Or even, less dramatic things. If you hear that a patient is needing to be straight cathed every 6 hours, or if someone's getting discharged and needs their IV out, ask if you can do it, because honestly, nothing is more relieving and exciting than when a student comes up being like, hey, actually, me and my instructor can do this. Is that okay? Like, please, happily take some of my tasks away from me. Like, I am usually running around all day long. And if someone wants to take any of those tasks away from me, like, more than happy. And so appreciative of it. So even if your nurse is not that engaging, I bet they will jump at the idea of you doing some of their work for them, as long as it's safe and appropriate. And along these same lines, if you hear in report that they are waiting for a consult from one of the specialties for one of your patients, hang out and see if you can catch when those doctors go in that room to talk to your patient. Even as a nurse today, I always try to be in the room or outside the room charting while these discussions are going on. It is just something that helps me to learn as a nurse what each of these specialties is looking out for, the kinds of questions that they ask these patients, what their ideas are or recommendations. And I remember when I was in school, I had a patient that had a pacemaker and we were waiting for cardiology to come by to see the patient. And I remember hanging outside the room when I saw the doctor go in, and I very casually went over to the door and just politely asked if I could listen while he was talking to the patient. And he was very sweet, invited me right in, and actually told me that he was going to be interrogating the patient's pacemaker and asked me if I wanted to stay and watch. And he was just so kind and took the time to show me where all the different leads were going, what he was doing, what he was concerned about. And honestly, at the time, I didn't quite get what was going on, and it pretty much just went over my head. But later, when I learned about pacemakers, and even now, it just makes way more sense and really just added to my learning and just my overall experience as a student. Also, if you are hanging out with your nurse and going around with them to see all their patients, and a patient asks for a new gown or some ice, and the nurse is still in there doing something, just go grab it. It saves so much time with the running back and forth that we do all day long. And if you can help just grab a warm blanket or a toothbrush, just little things that save a few extra minutes in the day, I'm sure it will be received very well. And with that, your nurse might find a few extra minutes to be able to teach you about something. Because while yes, I know some nurses are just not super fond of teaching or having a nursing student right by their side all day, I do still believe there are plenty of nurses that do enjoy teaching and want to be able to give back to nursing students, but might just come across as cold or short simply because they are already overwhelmed in their own day. It really feels like we are expected to do more and more as the nurse. And of course, teaching takes extra time and effort, so they might be less likely to jump at the idea of involving a nursing student because they're already stressed out that day. But if you can find ways to add value to that nurse and make them feel like you are a partner with them and on their team and can help them throughout their day, I wonder if you'll find more nurses who actually do enjoy teaching and want to involve you and want to make your experience as a nursing student so much better. I remember I had a clinical rotation and I met one of the coolest nurses and I got paired with her, and she told me that she was pretty much a brand new grad, fresh off of orientation, and she gave me a heads up that she was probably going to be really busy, really overwhelmed, but that I am more than welcome to jump in and follow along with her, even though she might not be able to teach me a whole lot or explain everything to me. And I remember just saying like, hey, I am so happy just to help you and really just to see what your day is like. And she was honestly probably the nurse that I learned the most from. I was able to jump in with everything she had to do. I would go get supplies. We'd do wound care. I helped get a patient ready while she was going over discharge instructions. I watched her medicate all of her patients while I helped get them washed up. And I remember how much she appreciated just me being there to be extra hands and just to make her day go smoother. And I was probably more appreciative of her for just allowing me to see what her day is really like and really how to manage a group of patients with everything that's expected of you. And then actually throughout that clinical rotation, there were weeks that I was not paired with her. And I specifically remember being paired with nurses that, again, just weren't interested in having me be as involved as she was. And basically, I would take care of the patient I was assigned to, but the rest of the time I would check in with her, see what she needed help with. So my advice to you is if you do find a nurse that you click with and they happen to be there again the following weeks, go ahead and see if you can help them. Personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to spend more time with someone who is appreciative of you and is also willing to try to teach you something and help you make the most of your clinical day, even if that isn't the nurse that you were originally assigned with. Because I do believe it is in some of your power to create the experience that you want to have. And my last piece of advice that I will leave you with today, if you feel like you're struggling to have conversation or to kind of break down that barrier between you and your nurse, is to just ask about their story. Every nurse is so unique, and how we all got to be where we are right now is probably not the same journey as somebody else. I have had friends that worked in ERs and then got their first job in the ER. I had friends that started out in the float pool as a nurse and then they switched and now they're working in the NICU, which is totally different than adults. And I had a friend who started out at a nursing home and then to rehab, and now she's like running the ER and traumas, and it's so amazing. And I think it can be really encouraging because I think some nursing students, when they graduate, they may not get their dream job that they always thought that they would get right away. And it can be a little defeating because you spend so much time in nursing school just focused and working and stressing. And when you finish and graduate and get RN behind your name, like you want to be exactly where you want to be and you feel like you deserve it. And you do. However, this doesn't mean that just because you don't get the job you have in mind right away doesn't mean that your story has to end there. And I think by listening to other people and talking to them about how they moved throughout the hospital or tried something totally different like outpatient or switched to peds, and how they got to be where they are right now, and just their advice on being open or making the best of where you are right now. Especially if you have a nurse that has been in nursing for like decades, just imagine some of the stories and the transitions and the things they've overcome to be where they are right now that you can learn from. I work with a nurse now that literally was a director of a small rehab hospital, and now she switched back to working at the bedside, and just hearing some of her stories of like what it was like to be on the management side and why she came back. It's just so interesting and thought-provoking. And honestly, if people are not that eager to be open and talking to you, chances are if you ask about their life, they would be more than happy to engage in conversation. People generally like to talk about themselves. So if you can get them going about their journey, I bet and hope that maybe they'll be a little bit more open and a little bit warmer to you. So that is what I will leave you with today. Let me know if any of these tips work out for you and how it improves your clinical days. And just remember that even if something feels like it's off to a rough start, remember that you have the power to try and change the situation moving forward. And do not let this cause you to feel like you had a bad clinical shift. So go have a great next clinical, no matter what rotation you're on or whatever nurse you work with. And I hope you have an amazing day and may you find light in every shift. Until next time.